Hello, my name is Dennis and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today I'm going to tell you about how I tried curing my mental illness by reading. The 3 books I read, and I'll explain why I got on this journey and why I chose these books. But the 3 books that I read were You're Not Enough and That's Okay by Allie Beth Stuckley, Chatter by Ethan Cross, and Nobody's Normal by Roy Richard Grinker. So starting off with You're Not Enough and That's Okay, I found out about this book because someone that I know works at Hobby Lobby. God bless Hobby Lobby. She saw this book and she was like, this is so silly. Because it's all about escaping the toxic culture of self-love. I'll read you like the description that it gives you when you like look it up on Google. So the description is from one of the sharpest Christian voices of her generation and host of the podcast Relatable comes a framework for escaping our culture of trendy narcissism and embracing God instead. We're told that the key of happiness is self-love, blah, 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 blah. Whatever. So I was like, this seems silly and ridiculous. I want to read it, but there's no way in hell I'm going to purchase it, so I'm going to get it from the library. So I went to the library. It was only available at like one library near me. I got my butt down there and I found the book, picked it up, and while I was there, I found the other 2 books, and I was like, wow, I'm going to cure mental illness. I'm going to cure anxiety. All of it. Gone once I read these books. Starting off with this one. I'll start by telling you the like 5 myths that like self-love culture she describes them as myths. 5 things that she believes are myths that self-love culture will try and convince you of. 1, you are enough. 2, you determine your truth. 3, you're perfect the way that you are. 4, you're entitled to your dreams. And 5, you can't love others until you love yourself. I don't know. It could have been a really good book. Like, she does have a very good argument sometimes, and like the points make sense. Like one of the myths that is just really not correct, at least in my opinion, the you can't love others until you love yourself. Like that's not correct. That's not how that works. And like you are enough, like the way that that's a myth is because like you are never going to be enough 100% of the time for every single role that you play in your life. So like you got to accept that you're not always going to be enough and everything. So that makes sense. It would have been good. And like even though like she brings in Christian concepts and like ties in the Bible with a lot of what she's saying, because she is a conservative Christian Fox News commentator, I should have known that it was going to get worse. Like I know I'm not the audience. I know I'm not the conservative Christian woman that she wants me to be. It's still just not good. Stuckley, Allie Beth, she reinforces this idea of how important it is that Christians understand the historical context of the Bible, the biblical context of passages of the Bible, and like understanding it like in a biblical concept, not like trying to relate it to ourselves, if that makes sense. But she seems to not understand some scripture herself. A lot of the 20th and 21st century translations of the Bible that are so popular now, they are homophobic, transphobic, etc. And push like social Christian and Eurocentric ideals onto Christianity, and that's oftentimes not what the original text, the original Bible, untranslated and everything, like that's not what it's saying. So it's like frustrating to like read over and over again her justifying homophobia and her justifying transphobia. It's like I could have been on your side. I could have. And then you started attacking trans people and I'm like, oh, this is awkward. Like what do I do? What do I do with this now? I couldn't look for the good parts anymore when I just had to keep on reading like how bad I was. How incorrect me being trans was. Without the homophobia, without the transphobia, without like the anti-abortion narrative that she's like throwing on me 100 times, it would have been good. It would have been a solid read, something that I could have got behind. It was interesting, like it was insightful, talking about like self-love, self-help, that like culture that you see on Instagram, and like a lot of self-help books are like trying to tell you like how perfect you are and da-da-da-da-da. Like you're not perfect, and that's fine. Like that's a completely great thing to like actually have people realize, is that you're not perfect and you never will be, which is fine. This could have been like 3 stars. It could have been, and I had to give it like a 1.5 for all the hateful rhetoric that it threw at my face. After I read that shit show of a book, I read Chatter by Ethan Kross. And it's about the voice, our like internal self-narrative, the voice in our head, like how it affects how we think, culturally, like how it's been used, and how to really like control it. And at least in my point of view, my internal monologue is something I struggle with a lot. I have a lot of intrusive thoughts that are very strong and very negative. So I thought it would be interesting to read an entire book about what goes on up here, like all the things that I say up here, how I can control that. Like he gives a few, I guess you could say, coping techniques that like I haven't actually like realized before, and I'm in therapy. I work on this like every day, and there were some techniques that I hadn't even heard of before, and I thought it was very, very helpful to like have even more tools in the toolbox to try and employ. And I'll even tell you some of them. So like I read this for you. You don't have to read this. One interesting one was using distanced self-talk. So kind of like you're narrating your own life. Sort of. So like you are like a fly on the wall watching yourself like narrating, I guess. There's an episode of Jane the Virgin where this is also kind of employed, where she's a writer, she's a romance writer, so like she writes very like emotionally, and like one day she was given like the task to like write very unemotionally, very uninvolved kind of, and like just stating the facts. So using like both of those aspects and just like narrating your life in a way that's very fact driven instead of emotionally driven, and just saying like, oh, Dennis is upset because he did XYZ. It just helps us like detach ourselves from the situation, like think of it from other points of views, like watching like a movie and thinking like, what would you do, sort of. Another interesting one is like kind of when you realize that you're spiraling, to try and like get yourself to like snap out of it and get out of that whole cycle of thinking. It's like directly talking to yourself, which is kind of like the previous method, but like the way that the author puts it, he had a very traumatizing experience and he started to spiral a lot, and like the way that he could kind of break out of it was being like, Ethan, like, do you understand like how silly you sound right now? His name is Ethan. Kind of like talking to yourself in that way, and like saying your name helps with that spiral, that whole cycle that we can get into. I don't know. Very interesting read. I think I gave it 4 stars, because some of it, like, I already knew, and some of it was just boring, but it was really good. And like, it actually does kind of help. I have been trying to use those and try and work on using those techniques, and it actually has helped a little bit. And the final book I read was Nobody's Normal, and this book is about how culture created the stigma of mental illness, and it basically tells a huge history across many different cultures of stigma in mental health, how stigma was like kind of not created but very strengthened by capitalism, how stigma and mental health is addressed in the military, everything like that, and how mental illnesses have been treated throughout history. It's all just very, it's good to understand the history. I never really looked into the history of like mental illness and how like schizophrenia was dealt with and how autism was dealt with and treated. Like, I just didn't know, and now I do know. And society's view on normal has expanded and changed throughout all time, and it's so different now. Like, what's normal now is like extremely different from what normal was then, but a lot of people now still attach their views of what normal is from past ideals, I guess. One aspect of my struggle with my mental health is I want to be normal. I want to not have mental health struggles. I want to feel like I'm like everyone else, and being trans really plays into that too. I don't like being trans one bit, and every day I wish that I could just be cis. It's just the way that it is, and I just don't feel like I'm ever like any of my friends. Like, a lot of my friends don't deal with anxiety, and I don't have any, or like I have very few trans friends, and the people in my life who are trans, like, they're more acquaintances than anything. So I don't really feel like I can relate to a lot of my peers in that way. So that feeling made me feel kind of distanced and just very abnormal, and I am very insecure about my mental health and this obsession with being normal. Anyway, this book has kind of helped me start to change my thinking, because I understand history's view on normal and how flawed that is, and knowing that there is no normal. Like, you can tell me that 100 times, but like, it's still hard to believe that there is no true normal. But it's starting to help me break out of my obsession with wanting to be that what everyone else seems to be, I guess. I don't know. I thought it was really great, really interesting history of mental health in the world. I gave it 5 stars. And to conclude today's video, I by no means am I cured from my anxiety, but I feel at least a little more comfortable in my mental health. I know that there is no cure for how I feel exactly. Like, there is no cure for anxiety. There is no absolute cure for gender dysphoria. I know that. I'm aware. I know. I have always kind of like tried to get it to end completely, but like, I know that there isn't a cure for this, and I don't know, just reading these books was kind of relieving for me. So I would say that while I didn't cure my mental illnesses, it did provide a relief, and it did help, and it was very constructive. It was very good. Things books were done here, and it was very, very good. I do recommend 2 of the 3 books here. If you want to get a good laugh, you can read this one. I don't have anything else to say. Bye.